Welcome to the T2 Hubcast. Join Martin, Dave, Spencer and guests as they discuss all things personal and professional development. The T2 Hubcast, brought to you by the People Performance People.
So welcome to the T2 Hubcast with me, Martin Johnson.
And me, Lydia English.
She's back.
I'm back.
So it can't have been that bad, Lyd.
I can't get enough now.
So we're back. Delighted to have Lydia English, our budding occupational psychologist and head of research, on the podcast. She made her debut in the last podcast when we spoke about...
ocean theory.
The ocean theory, the 5 big personality factors or characters. Now... Lydia said she was nervous and she'd never do it again. And then within 5 minutes, she went, what should we do for our next one? So I was like, she's got the bug. So we've got Lydia back in. So welcome back, Lydia. How did you find the first one on reflection?
I think I enjoyed it.
You must have done.
There was a bit of extra perspiration going on. But yeah. No, you just need to get back on the bike, don't you?
Absolutely. So what are we going to talk about today, Lyd?
So we're talking about attachment styles today.
Attachment styles are really important to understand. We talk about them a lot in sessions here at T2. I would say we talk about them more in one-to-one coaching sessions than in general sessions. And that is because when people are starting to unpick how they are, why they are like they are in relationships, why they have sometimes troubles with their relationships, either in the workplace or in their personal life, then attachment styles or our attachment style is a really important thing to maybe understand and uncover, because it gives us some answers as to why we are like we are in our adult relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
But attachment styles, Lyd, I'll bring you in. They start in childhood, almost from birth. You start developing what we call an attachment style.
Yeah.
And it's primarily, am I right in saying, based on the mother and father, the caregivers, the primary caregivers, how they parent, and in those early stages starts to develop an attachment within a person almost from day dot. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. So, I mean, studies go back to, within, seconds of a baby being born. That's why, when a baby's born, they do the skin to skin thing. That's based on psychological theories and attachment, and actually creating that initial bond from the very
outset.
Yeah.
So the skin on skin is with the mother, the primary caregiver, the maternal mother, is that baby needs to know from almost the first second that there's somebody there to protect them.
Yeah, exactly.
So, the skin on skin, the chest, the embrace is I've got you type thing.
Yeah. And a study by a guy called Harlow, it was in the 50s. So he wanted to find out actually what was it that kind of made the initial bond. Was it food? Was it protection? Was it comfort? And so he did a test with baby chimps, and it sounds a bit bizarre, but so he had a wire monkey mother and another mother kind of figure made out of cloth. And what he did, he actually found, so he gave the wire monkey food, and he just left the cloth mother without anything. And he found that actually the baby chimps spent more time with the cloth mother and just went to the wire mother when they were hungry. But as soon as they were fed, they'd go straight back to the cloth mother. So they crave comfort. And so that's kind of probably one of the most early studies in attachment, which basically says that babies crave comfort.
Yeah. And it's why when babies are young, I've got 3 children, so I remember this well. When babies are young, after the initial bond is made with mother and child, and then obviously the father embraces and cradles in the early stages, so that bond is made, that security is established, then it's why when you put babies down, because you're busy in the house or whatever, babies cry. And sometimes it's not because they're hungry or they're tired or they need their nappy changing. It's because you've put them down.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my God, they've gone. So it's why you keep picking your child up as a baby, then they stop crying. But if you do that relentlessly, you cause another problem. However, what they're finding in later studies is letting babies cry it out is not actually a good thing, because they need that level, that middle ground of saying, you are there for me
Yeah.
and you will come to my aid when I need you.
Yeah.
But there's a fine line in providing that security, but then also slowly starting to, sort of teach the child that they are okay on their own at times.
Yes.
But going back to it, attachment theory is you will create your level of attachment. There's 3 main attachment styles that you can develop into adulthood as a result of those early experiences with your caregivers, primarily parenting.
Yeah.
It creates an attachment style with you. Now, the reason why this is important is because by the time you reach adulthood, it directly it directly impacts and influences the way you view your relationships with others, whether that's in your marriage and your partner, whether it's your friendships, whether it's your work colleague relationships. You will have one of the 3 attachment styles, and that will then form the basis of which you interact with other human beings for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So it's important to understand them. There's no right or wrong, like anything. You can't go back and change it. It is what it is. But generally, you will have one of 3 attachment styles.
Yeah.
So let's reveal them then, Lyd. Let's go through them one by one.
Okay.
What's the first attachment style you can have, and what's influential on creating that in that early childhood phase?
Yeah, so I think kind of before we go into it, it's important to say that these attachment styles were identified by a psychologist called Mary Ainsworth, and she carried out a study which is famously known as the strange situation. So basically, it involved a mother and a baby. Babies were normally between 1 and 2 years old, and the mother and the baby would be in a room. Then a stranger would come in. The mother would leave the baby with the stranger. The mother would come back. Then the mother would leave again. Then the stranger would leave, and then the mother would come back and the stranger would go. And basically what they were doing, they were observing the way the child behaved when the mother returned and when the mother left. And that's where they established these 3 attachment styles. So the first one was secure attachment style.
So that's really interesting, because that sets the scene on how these 3 attachment styles have been observed based on the reactions of a primary caregiver leaving you with a stranger.
Yeah.
So it's assessing that child's level of anxiety or comfort when being alone.
Yeah.
Right. Got you. So the first one is secure.
Secure.
What does that mean?
So basically, secure. Well, if we're looking at how the children behaved, so when the mother left, secure children they'd be upset. And if they were left with a stranger, they'd avoid the stranger. But when the mother came back, they would, be welcoming to the stranger, and also they'd be happy when the mother returned as well, which is important when we start discussing the other 2 attachment styles.
Yeah. So no extremes of behaviour there in that experiment. The baby was not distressed when the mother left the room, but also not overly affectionate to the stranger.
Yeah,
they were
a bit wary of the stranger.
They were just wary, but they were sat there normal without distress.
Yeah.
And when the mother returned, they were happy. It was a happy response for the mother. And in the mother's presence, then felt more comfortable in interacting with the stranger.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So that's a secure attachment style. And it's worth mentioning at this point that if you develop a secure attachment style, as you go into adulthood, that bodes really well for relationships, because it sort of means, Lyd, in a nutshell, doesn't it, that someone with the secure attachment style can be very comfortable in their own skin and on their own, or with strangers, and they can also be very affectionate and close with intimacy and with close relationships.
Yeah.
So they have the ability to almost deal with any situation, meeting new people, being with people who they know. Secure means I am secure in who I am. I don't need anything, but I also enjoy the closeness of intimacy.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So what was the second experiment that they did where there was a different reaction?
Yeah. So the second attachment style is anxious. So these children, when the mother left the room, it was the end of the world. It was intense distress, completely beside themselves. They, when they were left with the stranger, they completely avoided the stranger and kind of showed signs of fear, like they were scared of the stranger completely. So when the mother then returned, the baby, it's almost like they were angry at the mum for leaving them, so they would resist the mother, and if the mother tried to comfort them, they'd push them away. And in general, these babies would cry more than the other attachment types.
So if you're listening to this, and it's not something to be worried about, because in all these attachment theories, they have good and bad traits as barring secure, which generally is just good.
Yeah.
But if you've ever taken your child to school and they are screaming, holding onto your leg, fearful of stepping through those gates and you leaving, it's that type of response, isn't it?
Yes.
And then you pick them up at the end of the day, even though they've been fine in the middle, they cry again.
Yeah.
At the fact that you've come back for them. That could be another example of this, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas if your child literally gives you a kiss and says, love you, bye, and runs off into the playground, that could be secure, right?
It could, yeah.
Or maybe something else, but we'll come to that.
Yeah.
So the point you're making here is the second experiment, or the second response in the experiment, was an extreme one to the first one. It was complete meltdown, crying, fear, the minute the mother left, fear at the stranger in the room, and then also crying and anger at the returning mother. So absolutely. Okay. And that just signals that child is developing what we call an anxious attachment style, where they need the closeness and the security of their caregivers almost all the time.
Yeah.
They need to feel like they're not on their own and they're not isolated. And as you can imagine, as that carries through into adolescence and adulthood, that could hinder your experiences, your confidence levels, your ability to take risks.
Yeah,
if you
definitely.
constantly need someone who you trust next to you.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was the third response?
So the third one was avoidant. So it's kind of what it says on the tin. These kids were avoidant. So when the mother left, they weren't bothered. There was no
see ya.
Yeah, no sign of distress whatsoever. They were fine with the stranger. When the stranger approached them, they'd play with them quite happily. When the mother returned, they
didn't even notice,
didn't acknowledge it, just didn't care that the mum had come back. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So basically, just avoidant. Completely blasé to what was happening around them. Just absolutely fine.
Yeah, I'm fine on my own. I'll always be fine on my own. You don't have to, there's no big deal about anything. People are people.
Yeah.
Space is space. Absolutely. So, and that's quite interesting, because I talk about these attachment theories a lot, and we'll go into this now into the second half of this podcast, because, avoidant attachment style is not a bad attachment style for certain reasons.
No.
It makes, as you grow older, if you're avoidant, and what sort of Lyd's saying there is, avoidant attachment styles say, I don't need affection and closeness. I don't need a protector. I am fine on my own.
Yeah.
And I'll show you that I'm fine on my own. In fact, if someone tries to protect me or tries to, be close to me, then sometimes I'll push away.
Push away, yeah.
And what that creates in an adult is this. It creates one hell of an independent human being.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm okay on my own. I can live on my own. I'll provide my own money. I'll work my way through life.
Yeah.
I have low levels of neuroticism when in time alone, because I actually like it.
Yeah.
So it actually bodes for a very independent, strong person. However, what it does do in adult relationships is sometimes avoidant people can be cold and distant and not pick up on emotions, and they don't always cater for other people's feelings and emotions. So say you've got a relationship with someone who's anxious, and they need a little bit of reassurance and they need affection.
Yeah.
The avoidant is not always good at giving that.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a match made in heaven if you've got an avoidant and an anxious person. But
unless you're aware of it.
Unless you're completely aware of it.
And you meet in the middle.
Yeah, and you know what your partner needs.
And just as the avoidant's got to cater for the anxious person's level of security, the anxious attachment has to cater for the avoidant space.
Yes.
Now, I would say at this point, and she probably kills me because I'm entering in all of our stuff, but Lucy, my wife, she's probably more anxious attachment style, and I'm definitely more avoidant.
Yeah.
However, we have a great marriage, 15 years, and the reason it works is because I understand what she needs.
Yeah.
And I step into that space, and she absolutely understands that I need my space, whether it's my career or playing golf or whatever it might be. She understands that I value that time. So as long as we both cater for it, it works.
Yeah.
Whereas if I become too avoidant, it makes her feel alienated.
Yes.
And if she becomes too anxious, it makes me feel oppressed.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is why it's really important to understand your attachment style if you can.
Yes. And I think as well, so we've obviously talked about very young children and forming that initial attachment with your primary caregiver, but it is also influenced by things that happen in your life up to you, maybe your early teens. So for instance, divorce, your parents getting divorced, the loss of a parent, being adopted, stuff like that. It kind of it does affect things. So there might be a child who initially has a secure attachment style, but then maybe their parents divorce when they're 6 or 7, and then that completely changes their style and they become avoidant.
Yeah, or or anxious, because it's like maybe you're very close to your father.
Yeah.
Your parents divorce when you're 8 or 9, and because you don't have that primary caregiver, that security of your father being there every single day,
Yeah.
you could develop an anxious attachment style.
Yeah, exactly.
You could go the opposite, where you go, right, got to stand on my own 2 feet now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna block it all out and be avoidant. My parents split when I was 11. I think I'm incredibly independent and avoidant, and I think maybe that had something to do with it as well.
Yeah.
I genuinely think my parents' style though was to bring us up as avoidant. It was very much like, come on, you get out there, you stand on your own 2 feet, you don't need me, go out and play, don't come back until lights go out, make your own sandwich, come on, you're old enough now. We were very encouraged to stand on our own 2 feet and to be independent. So I think generally that was it. We also wasn't incredibly forthcoming with like a verbal affection.
Yes.
Now, we loved each other dearly, don't get me wrong, and my parents love all of us dearly and we love them back, but we weren't a family where we kissed and cuddled and said I love you every 2 minutes.
No.
Do you know what I mean? We just weren't like that.
Yeah.
We were quite avoidant as a group, really.
Yeah.
As in independent. And even now, sometimes if my dad ever said to me, I love you, it's very selected and rare and in the right moment.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm very similar in a way. My parents divorced when I was 4, but initially before that, so my mum, her parenting style was maybe a cross between secure and avoidant. So she provided the love, gave you hugs, but would also be like, right, go off, you're absolutely fine, crack on, kind of thing. My dad was very avoidant, didn't provide any affection or anything like that. And so after they split, I had my mum there, and we've kind of never been a family that does the I love you as well. We've never done that as a family, and if someone says that to me now, it makes me feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is. It's got to be, don't get me wrong, we all need it, but it's got to be sincere and at the right moment.
Yes.
Whereas my parenting style with my kids, me and my wife, is, and this is because I genuinely believe in it and it's how I feel, is I tell my kids I love them every day.
Yeah.
It's just a thing in our life. I give them a kiss goodnight and I say I love you.
Yeah.
And they say I love you too, Dad. And that's the way it is. And I think hopefully my children are definitely developing a secure attachment style, because there's never a day where they would wonder if we did.
Yeah.
Or they are left alone without support.
Yeah.
Now, I still believe, I said before this podcast to you, I actually think I wouldn't mind my kids growing up with an avoidant attachment style, because it certainly served me well. But you have to be incredibly self-aware of that and be able to cater for relationships, or you could be cold and distant.
Yeah, exactly.
Too cold and distant.
Yeah.
So let me move this on, because there's an interesting thing. When I talk about this, I read about attachment styles in Dan Goleman's Emotional Intelligence book. Now, he's a leading psychologist. He's the thought leader in emotional intelligence, and he goes into, real depth around attachment styles and how they impact emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And what he was saying was they did studies where they studied parenting styles even after the initial attachment style had, of their early years, but say 6 years old to 18 years old, as your brain's developing, they looked at the way the parents parented.
Okay.
And what he found was this, in a nutshell. The secure attachment styles by adulthood was where the parents give unconditional love, care, and affection, like we were just saying.
Yeah.
I love you, good night, kiss, always there. I'm always here.
Yeah.
And when they're disciplined, they did it without volatility and rage.
Okay. Yeah.
That was really instrumental in developing a secure attachment style, because it was like the child never ever questioned or wondered
whether they were loved.
Yeah. Because even when the discipline came, it was without the rage, the shouting, the swearing, the volatility, the hitting, the whatever it might be.
Yes, so they weren't getting those mixed messages.
No.
It was a constant message.
It was a constant message that even when you do wrong, we will tell you you've done wrong and there will be consequences, but it's not that you're not loved and you will still be protected.
Yeah.
So they were saying parents in that style. The second avoidant attachment style, they found that it was parents who didn't really offer love, care, and affection verbally or physically. Don't mean to say they didn't love them or care for them or give them the basic needs, but it was very much a parenting style like I described, where it was, you don't need to be told you're loved.
Yeah.
Right?
You should know.
You should know. Just get out there and do your thing.
Yeah.
Be independent, learn about the world, stand on your own 2 feet.
Yeah.
And almost the parenting style where you had to do something really special to get some recognition.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're not just going to get, you got to earn it.
Yeah.
That created an avoidant attachment style. So it was almost like the kids who were free to, roam the school field and stay out as long as they want, and just have that, there was avoidant. The secure, the anxious attachment style was interesting. What they found with this one was it was most common in adults who described parenting styles as flipping from love, care, and affection, love you, kisses, cuddles, embraces, to volatility and rage.
Yeah.
Slaps, clips, shouting, aggression, all of that type of stuff. And that was because as the brain develops, you would send in a conflicting message.
Yes.
You are secure and I love you, or no, you're not.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the child doesn't know what's going on.
So a child, because they don't have a rational brain at that point, can't say this is for the good of me. They're only doing it for the good of me. They're just signaling this is not very nice.
Yeah.
I fear this.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, no, my dad or my mom's really nice. Oh my God, I fear this.
Yeah.
So it creates this not knowing where you stand in relationships, which I thought was quite an interesting view.
It's almost like the child's walking on eggshells. It's like, oh, what mood's my mum going to be in today?
Am I going to be liked today, or am I going to be not? And you know what? I we do this for a living, and we're all human. If you're a parent there now worrying, don't. I get it wrong with my kids sometimes.
Yeah.
I think generally I parent in a way which is love, care, and affection. And when we discipline, I try my very best to do it without volatility and rage.
Yeah.
However, when I'm tired, when the kids are relentless, when everything's building, you have your moments where you shout or where you raise your voice. I mean, you don't clip my kids at all, but I mean, we grew up in a generation where you got a good clip if you stepped out of line. And it did us all right at times, right? But, it's different these days. But we all fall foul of this, just losing your cool, just raising your voice over trivial things.
Yeah.
So the best advice I could give is don't worry, because it's all about child's perception as well.
Yeah.
They could be perceiving that as, making me independent and strong.
Yeah.
But the golden rule is if you're a parent, try to, where you can, offer love, care, and affection.
Yeah.
And when you discipline, do it without volatility and rage.
Yeah.
And if you can try and do that more often than not, you'll find the balance.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. So with the time I've got left, Lyd, let's say you get your attachment style by your adult. You are anxious, avoidant, or secure.
Yeah.
What does this sort of mean? Good pros and cons very quickly for the three. So if you're secure, let's start with that.
Yeah.
What's the pros of being secure as an adult, and what's the things to watch out for?
So secure. So you have a strong sense of who you are yourself. You're happy, being. You don't have to be in a relationship, but you also like being in a relationship. In terms of your friendships, you're just secure in the way you see them. You're not worrying like, oh, maybe they took that the wrong way or anything like that. You're just completely...
There's no jealousy.
So
you're not thinking, is my partner going to cheat on me? Does that friend talk about me behind my back?
Yeah.
There's none of that with secure, because you're very comfortable, and what will be will be.
Yeah.
Type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, cons to secure, I don't know if there are any.
No. I've often asked this question. if you're secure, which means you can cater for both the other two attachment styles, so I can get on with avoidant people or I can get on with anxious people, then you are sort of high level of emotional intelligence, very low levels of neuroticism, and capable of almost getting along with anybody, which means, it means that it's going to put you in good stead generally for all types of relationships. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Avoidant then.
Avoidant. So avoidant people, I mean, it's probably an extreme saying that they're loners.
Yeah.
But they're happy being on their own. It doesn't, they're not bothered. It doesn't make a difference whether they're in a relationship or not. I'm not saying either that they can't be in relationships, because, well, obviously you're avoidant. You've been married 15 years, but they can give or take it, basically. But once they're in a relationship, they can be quite happy there. And actually, they don't necessarily worry about what their partner's doing.
I have never once in all my years of marriage ever thought of what Lucy's doing when she's not with me.
No.
Or feared if she would go off with somebody else or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that's not because I'm saying that if it happened, I wouldn't be bothered. That's just saying that it doesn't even enter my head. You know, I sort of take the view that worst case scenario, I'd always be okay.
Yeah.
That's what avoidant people sort of do.
Yeah.
But being in a relationship is amazing for an avoidant, as long as the space at times is granted or catered for.
Yeah.
I think any avoidant in a relationship which feels it's too full on or too they're being oppressed too much or hemmed in or held back, that's when it'll be a problem for an avoidant. But avoidants can be incredible in relationships if they're given the space.
Yeah, if the partner understands the way they are.
And also if the avoidant caters for the partner.
Yes.
Because it can't all be your way.
No.
You can't do your own thing and be the feelings and emotions, the thinking about the small things that make a big difference.
Yeah.
It means stuff to people with different attachment styles. And avoidance just got to think about that a little bit more because it doesn't come natural.
No. Yeah.
Okay. And anxious, of course. Now, if you listen to this and you think you might have an anxious attachment style, you might be thinking, shit, I've got the worst one of the three. That's why I'm this, that, and the other. Listen, don't. As Lydia will probably explain, it can generate some of the most caring people on the planet.
Yeah.
Some of the most affectionate people on the planet, right? So don't worry, but you've just got to guard against probably the cons of being anxious. So how would you describe as an adult, how does this manifest in relationships?
Yeah, so in a relationship, an anxious person, they'll be, like you say, extremely caring, very loving. They kind of crave attention from their partner. They want cuddles all the time. They want affection. But then it can be flipped and it can make them seem like they're untrusting. They can worry about what their partner's doing. But they can be quite insecure in themselves and quite self-critical of themselves, and they kind of question everything that's going on.
Yeah. Sometimes they struggle with self-worth.
Yes.
Because it's that never, and we see this in the print profiling that we do, maybe with 2s and 6s, to be needed and appreciated, to be safe and secure. It's that constant worry about, am I good enough? All the rest of it. But like I say, some of the most humanistic, affectionate, giving people on the planet.
Yeah.
It sums my wife up perfectly.
Yeah. They just want to be loved.
Yeah. But they'll think of everybody else before themselves.
Yeah.
They'll go above and beyond in that bid to get it back. The problem with it is if it doesn't come back, then that fuels further worries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the best thing to think about if you're an anxious person now, if you've got an anxious attachment style, is don't resent it and don't try and change it. It probably makes you the person who you are. You are probably one of the most giving, caring, affectionate people on the planet.
Yeah.
You just got to understand when it's going into overdrive and you're asking the impossible of others.
Yeah.
Certainly if they are avoidant.
Yes.
Secure people will cater for anxious people, no problem. It's the avoidance that can make an anxious person feel left out or whatever it might be. And the avoidance don't mean to.
No.
They're just doing the wrong thing.
It on purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Lyd, that's fascinating. When with a minute left, we'll wrap it up. Thank you for that. And I think if you're listening to this, just think what resonates most with me. Let me embrace that. It's not good or bad. Let me embrace it and let me just keep on the right side of it.
Yeah.
Let me understand the dynamic of my relationships and why sometimes I feel like I do. Avoidance, be comfortable in your skin, but cater for others. Anxious, just when it goes into overdrive, care a bit, but be yourself. And secure, if you're blessed with the secure attachment style, you're probably navigating relationships pretty well.
Yeah, lucky buggers.
Yeah, lucky buggers, and thank your parents. So other than that, we'll be back probably with another one, Lyd, because you're well in it now.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Awesome. And we'll think of another topic maybe next week to come back and discuss, all right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Lydia English, awesome. And we'll be back shortly with another T2 Hubcast.